After dying from overwork, an author wakes up in her own novel as a disposable extra destined to die immediately. Her genius survival plan: fake her resume and become the nanny for the black-hearted villain she literally wrote to be terrifying. Now she's bottle-feeding the future final boss, dodging poison cakes, and trying not to fall for the brooding duke she originally planned to murder. Talk about a hostile work environment where the penalty for quitting is death. One day at the residence of the Winthrop's Grand Duke at the Lagnic Empire, the two new nannies, Evelyn and Bella, were welcomed by Alan, the butler. As the three of them entered the giant mansion, Alan asked Evelyn and Bella to observe every detail of the mansion, as they would be attending to the daily routines of the master from now on. According to Alan, the Grand Duke isn't someone very demanding, but being an experienced warrior, he greatly seeks order. He then proceeded to show the two new nannies the drawing room, where the Duke receives his guests unless they are of an important status. Bella then turned to a giant portrait, as Alan claimed it belonged to their master, the Grand Duke. The man was exactly how Bella had pictured him, as she had traveled a long way to come and find him. The novel known as The Bloody Throne and The Silver Vow tells the tale of Cale Winthrop, the illegitimate imperial child who is adopted by the Grand Duke, who saves him from execution. After eventually falling for the daughter of the Duke, Cale Winthrop decided to reclaim his birthright. Seeing how the Empire was suffering from the tyranny of Adrian Winthrop, Cale Winthrop decided to leave the domain of the Duke in order to enlist in the ranks of the Bara army, where he proved himself to be a genius leader. But little did the Bara army know that after successfully slaying the Emperor, his desperate nephew Aaron Winthrop makes his brother flee to safety before installing his rule of fear and ruin. In front of these butcheries, Cale Winthrop had no choice but to personally take the life of Aaron, and after proving himself to be of the imperial bloodline, he finally claimed the throne and crowned the daughter of the Duke his empress. The author was pulling an all-nighter trying to summarize this novel for her second job. She had lost count of the revisions, and as she was reading the introduction of Aaron, she began to think of how she needed to finish this chapter in order to pay off the student loans of her siblings. At that moment, the author was struck with a horrible headache. She fell from her chair while desperately trying to meet the deadline. She found that her life was rather boring, so she didn't have any problem losing it. Yet her only regret was the fact that she was about to pass away before completing this novel, just as she began writing the final villain. When suddenly someone woke her up, the author seemed totally different. She was surprised by the fact that she managed to live to see another day, and quickly assumed that someone had rushed her to the hospital. But seeing how luxurious the room was, she assumed that it was some kind of special hospital, and began to pray that this wasn't a VIP room, seeing how she couldn't possibly afford it. The heroine pinched herself, thinking that this was a dream, but was startled by the sensation of pain. At that moment, the maid urged her to quickly get up, as she had an important meeting today. The heroine tried to ask for an explanation, yet the maid was trying to rush her, as she was afraid of the Count. Only then did she realize that since this is undoubtedly real, it could only mean that she had truly reincarnated into her novel as the only character that dies without saying a single word. This made her curse her luck, as instead of coming back as an important character, she was now the disposable Vienia Tangaran. Tangaran was a corrupt house that supported the tyranny of the current emperor, and its current head, Count Tangaran, was a despicable scum who would offer his daughters as concubines to the emperor in order to gain his favors. This made the lady wonder what time of the story she was currently living in, yet she was certain that it must be before the Count sells his daughters. At that moment, she overheard someone having a conversation about Grand Duke Rayan Winthrop, who was returning today with the new title of Archduke. The maids were talking about how handsome he was, and while the first claimed that he must be like his brother, the emperor, the second one claimed that they weren't alike according to the rumors. Upon hearing this, the protagonist began to analyze the situation, as Rayan Winthrop was the brother of the emperor and the father of Aaron. But only then did she realize horrified that the important guest mentioned this morning by the maid must be Rayan, meaning that Vienia Tangaran was to become a concubine as of today. A few days after entering the domain of the emperor, her character would be killed in cold blood for refusing to look into the eyes of his majesty. The heroine immediately ran away, horrified by the cheap death that was awaiting her as the maids finally noticed her. Later on, near sunset, Vienna's maid came to escort her down, but to her horror, she was only met with an almost empty closet. Meanwhile, elsewhere in town, the girl was still unable to believe that she managed to escape the house of the Count, as it had surprisingly bad security. Following the Isekai novel logic, she realized that she must have been labeled dead by now after passing away so pathetically. This left her quite annoyed, as she had high hopes for her book to the point where she had already scheduled a fan signing date. Even so, she decided to stay positive and make a new life for herself in this new world, hoping that she might be able to return to her old one day. The heroine decided to find herself a nice job in order to secure herself a decent life, when suddenly a man came out of nowhere and snatched her bag away, leaving her quite horrified as all of her money was inside this case. She then proceeded to cuss and scream at the thief, when suddenly someone tripped the thug over, making him fall face first to the ground. The red-headed young man revealed that he had been watching him from afar after noticing him secretly stalking the lady. He then decided to let him flee, but promised to punish him if he ever saw him again. The young man then handed the grateful lady her bag and explained to her that it wasn't safe for her to be alone outside at this hour. He then pointed out that the still shocked lady must be a noble judging by her outfit and asked her for the reason she was walking here alone without any of her servants. She proceeded to cook up a half-baked excuse, as it wouldn't be right to reveal that she had fled her home. Even so, the young man quickly realized the situation of the protagonist, but decided to not say anything about it and just warned her to be more wary later on before making his leave. But before that, the protagonist demanded to know the name of her savior. The young man humbly claimed that he was only doing his duty before introducing himself as Edwards Kamar, the guard of the emperor. The author was shocked to hear this name, as Edwards Kamar is the right hand of His Majesty and would commit numerous atrocities in his name. Edwards was surprised to see her this shocked, so she claimed that she didn't expect to meet someone this important, while in reality she was completely blown away by the fact that this person was nothing like the scum she knew. The young man claimed that he was only doing his job, stating that the capital wasn't as safe as it used to be, which is why he asked her to be wary. And as Edwards Kamar made his leave, our protagonist, who was still shocked to see herself getting rescued by an antagonist, decided to find a place to spend the night. With that, the heroine began to wonder where she should go while thinking about how horrible it would have been to see her belongings stolen. Despite having written this world, she wasn't omnipotent. The current emperor kept on his reign of terror. Security and politics both suffered from heavy corruption. Finding a safe place would be difficult, as commoners in this economy were ready to do anything in order to survive. Currently, the leading heroes were still children, and our heroine needed to find a place where no one would know about her or her father, the Count. And so after thinking for some time, she realized that the only right answer was Grand Duke Rayan, whom the maids had spoken of. While the eldest son of the Winthrop house was the rightful emperor by law, the second son, Rayan, is considered a war hero loved by the people, who would be murdered by his brother in the future. A decade after his death, his son Aaron would assemble a rebel army and successfully dethrone his uncle. Aaron manages to finally avenge the murder of his father after 10 years. Yet the young man who had fallen to madness kept on butchering everyone, as his one true goal was to burn the empire to the ground. Aaron Winthrop is the final boss of the novel, born of the atrocities of his uncle. As the next morning dawned, the heroine began to think of how the Grand Duke, who lived on the border because of his brother, wasn't acquainted with her father. Aaron must still be sane, as his father was still alive. But the most important point was the fact that the protagonist had written the Grand Duke as someone who cherishes his servants, meaning that the best way for her to thrive in this world would be to work for him under a fake name. Later on that day, a crowd went to see the arriving hero. The people were overjoyed at the arrival of the Grand Duke and immediately began to beg him to save them from his tyrannical brother. Grand Duke Rayan Winthrop, who hadn't set foot into the capital for a while, began to wonder about the misdeeds of his brother, seeing how the people's hatred towards him was only growing. With that, he entered the castle as the people begged for his protection. Shortly after, the Emperor Adrian Winthrop learns that the Grand Duke wishes to speak with him. Rayan quickly knelt down and formally greeted His Majesty. Yet the Emperor urged the war hero to show some casualties. Rayan claimed that he wasn't, but the servant of the throne, and that all of his feats were in fact in the name of the Emperor. The man was satisfied with this response and asked his brother to stand up. He then affirmed that the citizens were all eager to greet his brother after the news of his victory had reached the capital. Rayan claimed that rumors often create themselves, which the emperor found quite funny, as his brother was prophesied to one day become the savior of the kingdom, which the citizens already claim him to be. Rayan stated that the people were merely glorifying the Winthrop name, and that the rumors were a bunch of nonsense, which is why someone like the emperor must pay them no mind. The monarch claimed that he wouldn't have given his brother the Grand Duke title if he believed the rumors, and that he was just making sure that they weren't feeding his brother's ego. At that moment, Rayan reassured his brother that he was loyal to the throne and that his duty towards it was his main priority. After hearing this, the ruler dismissed his brother to his mansion after his long journey. And as he made his leave, the emperor asked his right hand if he should believe the words of his brother. Edwards confirmed, claiming that only time would showcase the true intentions of the duke. The emperor agreed, stating that he did the right thing by summoning the duke to the capital. Once home, the duke asked Alan, the butler, if his brother truly mentioned sending the palace attendant to fix his mansion. But seeing how terrible it seemed, he asked the butler to hire repairmen. At that moment, Alan pointed out how odd it was for the emperor to generously grant his brother the title of Grand Duke. The duke urged them to stay silent and said that all they needed to do was to properly execute their assigned jobs. He then asked about his son, so Alan revealed how he was still following the schedule that he had given him before leaving, meaning that he should currently be in history class. When asked about the nannies, the butler revealed to his master that many mothers with experience would arrive in a week. Thus, he was asked to make sure all were present in time. 7 days had passed since then. The Grand Duke entered the room with his known as Owen. Alan presented Bella and Evelyn as the 2 new nannies. From here on, the heroine would refer to herself as Bella. She decided to buy the name of a mother who was indirectly sold off to the mansion, forcing her to leave her baby behind. The mother had no reason to refuse to give away her identity in exchange for the protagonist's money. Bella began to panic as the Duke gazed at her, claiming that he had examined her CV. As he asked her if Bella was truly her name, the lady confirmed. With that, the Duke asked the butler to explain the rules of the mansion carefully, and so Alan escorted the ladies outside the room. The man then decided to hear the report of his aide, who revealed how the people were complaining, as the taxes had been incredibly high. The Duke knew that there were many problems to handle, yet still asked Owen to check the background of the nannies, especially the younger one. When asked for the reason behind this request, the Grand Duke explained that Bella might be a spy of the Emperor, as her hands were too soft to belong to a struggling mother who just gave birth. Alan explained to the ladies that they needed to follow some rules regarding the meals of the young master, and firmly affirmed that they needed to follow them as they were implemented by the Grand Duke himself. Upon hearing that Aaron would receive a military punishment if seen eating candy or having anything after a rather early dinner, Bella found those rules to be rather extreme, as this child was practically a toddler. This drift of mind made the butler scream at her as he firmly urged the 2 nannies to dive into the details later and come with him. A little later, Alan took them to Aaron's room and explained that they would take turns sleeping in the small chamber nearby, while the other returned to the servants' quarters. He then explained that the young master needs to be properly washed and dressed, but above all, to wake up very early, as his father greatly values time. Evelyn bowed respectfully, claiming that she would fulfill her duty. Seeing this, Bella, who didn't know better, decided to copy her, which didn't go unnoticed. And so, as Alan decided to continue the tour, the protagonist began to think that by imitating others, she might fully learn the ethics of this realm. Sometime later, the 3 servants set foot on the training grounds. There, someone was training ferociously, whom Alan introduced as the young master and claimed to be a young man who always does his best in order to satisfy his father. Just like that, the heroine laid her eyes on young Aaron for the first time. The author had a hard time believing that this innocent child was to be the final villain of her novel. This made her feel that the characters in her book were all monsters for driving Aaron to the edge, and that she was the biggest monster of all for giving him such a dark future. After the death of the Grand Duke, Aaron's heart would be penetrated by evil, which made the heroine wonder about what would happen if he didn't go through this traumatic event. Alan then firmly warned the nannies not to interrupt the daily training session of the young master that stretches from morning till noon. As the needles finally landed on the 12, young Aaron, who noticed the presence behind him, was finally allowed to rest. Alan then introduced Evelyn and Bella to the young master as his new caretakers. As Aaron desperately tried to catch his breath, Bella noticed his excessive sweating as well as his bad complexion. After Alan explained to the boy that he needed to choose one of the 2 maidens to be his main nanny, he immediately pointed his finger and chose Evelyn, leaving her rather proud while her shocked co-worker was still wondering about the state of the young master. With that being said, Alan urged her to go start the fire to heat Aaron's bathwater, and despite trying to play it cool, Bella had no idea how to do so. Only then, as she turned around, did the horrified maiden realize what was truly happening. With that, she suddenly rushed to the child, screaming. Evelyn misread the situation, affirming that she had already been chosen as the main nanny. Bella ignored her and shocked the young master by correctly guessing that training had recently become more difficult, as well as that respiratory problems and throat pain had recently manifested. As Alan came to see what the problem was, she claimed that Aaron's life was in danger and that he needed immediate help, leaving him in a state of panic. Bella showed him the bruises on the neck of the young master, claiming that his excessive sweating was the result of his intense training while suffering from illness. Thus, he rushed to call in a doctor. A little later, while in the chamber of the young master, the doctor affirmed that Bella was right, as Aaron truly suffers from a lung disease, and advised the adults to give him his medicine daily. Shortly after, as Alan escorted the doctor to the exit, the father asked his son why he had hidden his condition and kept on training. But as Aaron explained that he didn't want to let him down, the surprised Grand Duke grew even more intrigued. The boy explained that he is trying to be like his father, who always returns from battle despite being injured. Upon hearing this, the father reminded his boy that he was still a child in training and urged him to never conceal his illnesses ever again. And so with that being settled, the Grand Duke decided to make his leave, while his son urged him to also take it easy and take care of himself. Bella felt saddened by the condition of the boy, who was obviously craving more time with his father. Later on, she was approached by the master, who recognized her as the one who uncovered the condition of his child, and asked her if she had studied medicine. So the heroine revealed how, when younger, her martial arts-obsessed brother often got hurt, and that she picked up some tricks by taking care of him. The Grand Duke praised her for her useful knowledge and urged her to keep taking care of his child, leaving her quite pleased. With that, the master made his leave, and Bella was left relieved. Meanwhile, Evelyn decided to act as soon as possible, as the other nanny was starting to foil her plans. Later that night, Bella began to think of how, despite getting herself a safe position, this place wasn't as safe as it seemed. And with the Emperor about to start his move against the Grand Duke, the nanny needed to do her best in order to protect him. Despite his carefree, cruel appearance, the ruler of the empire was in fact a smart and sly psychopath. Protecting the Grand Duke was a rather challenging task, as he is fated to die at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor, whom she obviously couldn't take on alone. At first, she thought of warning the Grand Duke to turn a blind eye to the corruption of his brother. But seeing how she had written him as an honest man, she quickly realized that this would be impossible. Bella then decided to think about the second option, which was to run away, yet one of her most recent experiences clearly shows that she wouldn't be able to survive on her own. This leaves her with the last option, which is to earn the trust of the Grand Duke and remain under his protection. Thus, she decided to show herself as a capable nanny in order to earn the trust of the father by getting the heart of the son. Eren was a kind and obedient child who was even able to take his bitter, tasting medicine without complaining. He was fully cured of his disease and was given the heroine as his main caretaker by Alan upon seeing how close the two of them had gotten. Bella and Eren went to spend most of their time together sharing walks, lessons, and even scoldings for bad behavior. Yet what the heroine didn't expect to see was the immense love of the Grand Duke for his child, which he had a hard time showing. Upon seeing this, the heroine, who had entered this place originally in order to keep herself safe, was appearing more and more like a genuine home. One day Bella rushed to the young master and offered him a plate full of chessboard cookies. Yet the boy knew very well that he wasn't allowed to eat sweets before his meal, whose time was drawing close. But the nanny cheerfully claimed that it shouldn't be much of a problem, as there was still some time before the meal, and promised not to tell his father about it. But only then were the goods snatched. Alan decided to take away the cookies while reminding Bella about the rule she had just broken, before eating one of the delicious sweets herself. As Bella playfully accused the butler of wanting to take the cookies for himself, Eren was unable to hold his laughter. But observing this happy scene from afar in silence was an ill-willed Evelyn. Some days later at the manor of the Grand Duke, the lord of the house was peacefully enjoying a book when Bella entered the room claiming that she had something to tell him about his son. The Duke was intrigued upon hearing the nanny mention the birthday of his child. As it turned out, the protagonist wanted to organize a party for the young master. Seeing how the man had been unable to celebrate the birthday of his child due to him being away for the sake of duty, he asked her to tell him more about it. She explained how he, as well as the rest of the servants, would give little Eren thought-out presents while she bakes a delicious cake while only using the finest of ingredients, along with an entire feast that everyone would enjoy. Pleased by those ideas, the Grand Duke asked her to keep explaining. But upon hearing her mention how she wanted to invite some children of nobles that were close to the young master's age, as it would greatly help and benefit him, the father immediately shut down the entire plan, leaving her shocked while demanding an explanation. This greatly surprised the Duke, who affirmed to the lady that he had no obligation to explain himself to her. The nanny immediately apologized, as she had forgotten her place for a brief moment. The Duke stated that she doesn't need to be sorried, and gently explained that due to the current political tensions, it wouldn't be wise to open the gates to outsiders. Bella, who had forgotten herself in the nanny role, realized that the man was right, as throwing a party now would only make the Emperor even more suspicious. So she admitted her mistake, as she was unable to account for politics, and claimed that she was simply aiming to make Eren happy childhood memories. This greatly shocked the father, who realized that the presence of other children would certainly make his child's party joyful. Thus, he decided to reconsider his decision and allowed her to organize a party with the members of the house only. This greatly pleased the protagonist, as this would certainly bring joy to the young master. With that, the Grand Duke, who was never able to assist with the birthday parties of his son due to his constant need on the battlefield, left the important task of organizing it to the nanny. Bella was happy to receive this task and promised not to let the Grand Duke down. But just as she was about to leave, she was stopped by her employer, which made her wonder if he needed anything else. Grand Duke Rayan asked the nanny what he should get his son as a gift. This greatly surprised Bella, but interpreting this as a sign of trust, she decided to give a great answer. She then proceeded to explain to the father that children are simple-minded and want something that showcases parental love rather than an expensive gift. The master was greatly intrigued by this answer, as the nanny claimed that the gift would be even more perfect if he crafted it himself, before rushing out of the room and leaving him alone to think about it. Meanwhile, at the castle of the Emperor, Edwards presented the ruler of the empire with the monthly tax revenue that was about 33% less than the previous month. Hearing this greatly upset the Emperor, who demanded an explanation. Edwards explained that the people were unable to afford to pay more due to the ongoing famine and natural disaster, which is why he advised lowering taxes for the time being. Yet the ruler was against it and ordered to increase the tribute demanded from the lords. This shocked Edwards, who who explained to His Majesty that even the nobles have suffered from the ongoing crisis, meaning that raising the tributes could incur their wrath. The emperor found this ridiculous, claiming that in case of complaints, they were free to return to him the lands he had generously granted them. The guard decided to obey his command. As the emperor mentioned how he had given a fief to the Grand Duke, Edwards immediately realized that His Majesty wanted to use him as an example. With that, Edwards decided to exit the room, while promising his master not to let him down. This one proudly shouted that he had chosen his hound well. Meanwhile, at the mansion of the Grand Duke, the nanny was happily preparing the birthday cake. Suddenly, one of the maids came to her and claimed that she was being summoned by Alan. So she leaves her work in order to go see him. A dark presence was left alone with the dough. Upon returning, Bella found it rather bizarre that the butler didn't need anything from her. She decided to continue her work and make a sour cake, as her master wasn't fond of sweetness. Bella aimed to get even more of the Grand Duke's trust by doing so. But upon looking at the dough, she found something unexpected inside it. Later this evening, Bella arrived at the scene along with her young master. She then lifted her hands and wished him a happy birthday while unraveling a marvelous-looking table. Upon seeing this, Aaron was left greatly amazed and claimed that it was the first time he had seen something like this. Bella revealed how the party had been organized by order of the Grand Duke, who regretted not having been able to celebrate his son's birthday. Aaron turned to his father and thanked him with a big smile. And before the man could even explain, his child rushed to hug him, which made the nanny think of how happy the boy seemed and how this Ryan seemed more fatherly than the one she had written. Seeing how happy his kid was, the Grand Duke couldn't help but let out a smile and express his happiness in response to his. But just as Bella was happy to see that this house, which seemed like a military camp, was slowly getting warmer, someone rushed to the master and ruined the moment. One of the guards claimed that an unwelcome guest had arrived. This guest, who turned out to be Edwards, claimed those words were rather offensive. Upon seeing him, Bella began to fear that he might recognize her, so she began to panic and rushed to hide her face. Only then did Edwards notice that he had stepped into the birthday party of a small child with nothing to offer. Thus, he decided to fix his mistake by pulling a weapon out. Upon seeing this, all took a defensive stance and demanded an explanation. Edwards revealed how this knife, which he had won in a duel against his brother while still young, had been in his family for a long time before gifting it to the young master. The child looked at his father, who allowed him to accept the present. Edwards then proceeded to wish the boy to grow up into someone who can win anything, like he himself won this dagger. With that being said, Ryan ordered Alan to take his son away. And so, as the child rushed outside with his nanny, the redhead couldn't help but feel as if she was familiar. When asked for the reason behind his sudden visit, Edwards revealed that he was here to do his job and deliver the request of the emperor. Later on, it was explained to the Grand Duke how his brother wanted to collect some extra funds from his nobles. Edwards also explained how His Majesty wanted the Grand Duke to be the first to pay up in order to set a good example for the rest of the aristocrats. Thus, Ryan generously agreed to contribute, seeing how this would help the suffering people, so Edwards decided to take his leave, seeing how he managed to get what he wanted. Yet when asked about the designated region for these funds, Edwards simply claimed that it would be given to the one who is most in need. Seeing how the Grand Duke decided not to ask any more questions, the guard decided to exit the scene. After that, Edwards left. The Duke's soldier revealed that he wasn't convinced that the Emperor wished to help his people. The Duke was of the same opinion and was certain that these funds weren't destined for the disaster zones. The guard agreed and stated that the attitude of Edwards, who didn't even bother to lie properly, made it rather clear. With that, the Duke urged the man to give this intel to the public. At that moment, Alan asked his master if he wished to end the birthday party. Yet the father refused and claimed that the festivities hadn't even started yet. Now came the time for the child to open his father's gift, revealing it to be a wooden doll that looked like young Aaron. Ryan stated that his woodworking skills were growing dull and offered to make another one if his son found this doll to be too clumsy, only for the child to affirm that this was his favorite present. He then promised to take good care of it before thanking his father from the bottom of his heart. This greatly pleased the Grand Duke. Now came the time to reveal the cake. Bella asked the birthday boy to make his wish. It didn't take him long before he wished to stay forever by his father's side. This made the nanny grow rather intrigued, as despite the deep love that the Grand Duke harbors for his son, he only shows his strict face. Later on, when the time to taste the cake arrived, the nanny happily offered the master a slice. Seeing how Bella claims that she only makes healthy desserts for his child like this one, the master decided to try it out, only to be suddenly stopped by Evelyn. She screamed that the cake contains lye and therefore was poisonous. And so after an awkward silence, Bella asked her if she could present any evidence. So Evelyn claimed to have seen her crime firsthand in the kitchen. This was found funny by Bella, who claimed that since she didn't stop her, Evelyn could be considered her accomplice. The old one proudly claimed that she only noticed afterwards, as upon using the dough that was left, it demonstrated some strange properties proper to lye when baked. She was then left quite shocked as Bella took a bite out of the cake and accused her of wanting the cake for herself only. Evelyn found her colleague to be mad, as she had willingly taken a bite out of a clearly poisonous dish. Bella affirmed that the fact that she was fine even after eating the cake meant that it was safe, and accused Evelyn of being the true poisoner. When making the cake, lemon juice revealed the poison. Seeing how the bubbles that appeared when the acidic juice came in contact with an alkali made her realize that the dough contained lye, which is why Bella rushed to alert Alan about the lye in her batter. And so, after the two of them investigated the staff rooms, they managed to find the lye that wasn't even used in the mansion for cleaning in Evelyn's room. With that, Alan and Bella asked her if she had anything to say to defend herself. In front of the undeniable truth, Evelyn crumbled speechless to the ground. The master gave her a dark glare and demanded to know who paid her to try to assassinate him and his son. Terrified, she affirmed that she wouldn't have stopped him from eating if she truly wished to see them dead, and that she only wanted to get the Bella that she envies in trouble. Even after hearing her explanation, the Grand Duke couldn't overlook the fact that she had almost gotten him killed. Evelyn began to apologize intensely, fully taking responsibility for her actions. Ryan didn't want to ruin Erin's special day, thus, he decided to punish her later. He then left her in the hands of his butler and stated that she must have committed the crime alone, seeing how poorly organized it was. Alan asked his master to rest assured, as he would severely scold Evelyn as well as demote her. With that, she was asked to come with Alan, but when passing Bella, this one asked her if there was truly no mastermind behind her deeds. Hearing this greatly irritated the other nanny. Bella affirmed that she should have focused more on her job instead of being envious of her while thinking about how, despite losing her position, Evelyn should have touched Ern's cake. Despite knowing that Ryan was trying to resolve this matter quietly, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. The Grand Duke apologized to Eren for his ruined birthday party. Even though the boy affirmed that he was very happy, claiming it to be the best party ever, the Duke promised an even better party next year before asking him to go to his room, as it was almost his bedtime. Yet before the nanny could take Eren to his room, the Grand Duke stopped her. He then stated to the intrigued nanny that his son greatly enjoyed his gift. Bella explained that it was only natural, seeing how the wooden doll carried fatherly love. With that being said, Ryan praised the heroine for her good work. This quickly made her realize that he was trying to express gratitude but was too shy to do it properly. Thus, she accepted the praise before going to Eren as the nanny accompanied the boy to his room. The Duke decided to turn a blind eye to this problem in order to protect his son's beloved nanny from the growing envy of the other servants in the imperial palace. The Emperor asked Edwards if the Grand Duke was truly curious about the destination of the funds. He confirmed, claiming that this question had some ulterior motive behind it. The Emperor then asked his right hand if he knew the reason the fishes rushed to him, making him assume that this was due to the fact that he feeds them. Hearing this, the man placed his empty hand into the water, and the fishes still rushed to him. The ruler explained that these beasts that were too dumb to understand would always rush to him, expecting food. This made Edwards realize that His Majesty wanted him to find a disposable pawn that he could manipulate as he pleased. This quick mind greatly pleased the Emperor, who affirmed that Edwards was much better than his brother, leaving him touched by such high praise. The Emperor then stated that Edward's father should wake up, seeing how his brother had added the daughter of Marquis Solon to his wives. Even so, the ruler commanded the family of Edwards, as Solon possessed vast, laborious lands. He then advised Edwards to take an example from his brother and find himself a wife, yet this one claimed that his top priority was protecting the crown. The Emperor found this laughable and explained to Edwards that his brother didn't marry out of love, but out of convenience for the sake of his house, and affirmed that he should do the same. He advised him to go talk with the sister of Count Kyle, who had arrived at the palace with him, and upon seeing how he was about to argue, the Emperor claimed that he would turn her into his plaything if Edwards wasn't interested in her. With that, Edwards agreed to go and greet the lady. The Emperor ordered one of the servants to serve tea and sweet things to the two of them and tell him how much time they would be spending together. This man knew very well that any hound with attachment could never betray his master. Meanwhile, at the Winthrop mansion, some came with some intel for the Duke. The man informed his master that the Emperor aims to send Count Kale to the Winard region, which suffered an earthquake last month. The Duke found this intriguing, as the reparation should be coming to an end, meaning that they are in no need of funds. The soldier proposed to ask Count Kale about it, seeing how he was a close friend of the Duke. Yet this one explained that they needed to plan carefully, as they didn't know if he was with the enemy or not. Only then did Alan announce the arrival of the said Count along with his son. The Grand Duke couldn't help but find this suspicious, as the timing was far too perfect. He then asked Owen to wait for him, while he tried to understand the situation from the Count. Count Kale entered the door with a big smile while greeting Ryan and pointing out that he should address him with his new title from now on. The Duke asked him to drop the formalities, while stating that this was their first reunion since he returned from the border. Count Kale then introduced his child as the most important person to him and asked him to greet the Duke, only for the boy known as Renan to rudely refuse. The Duke overlooked the behavior of the child and asked the butler to take him to Eren. With that, Alan escorted Renan to meet his young master. Meanwhile, in Ern's chamber, Bella promised to give him a glass of milk later on. Seeing the little master in his attire, the nanny couldn't help but find him adorable. At that moment, Alan entered and introduced young Renan as the second son of Count Kyle, which was a name that the heroine was familiar with. Aaron politely introduced himself to the child, yet this one refused to respond, shocking everyone. With that, Alan decided to go tend to the adults while the nanny took care of the children. In her novel, the author wrote about Count Kale as a small character who betrays the Duke later on, and she began to wish to hear their conversation, as he must have been sent by the Emperor. Renan immediately began to criticize the residence of the Grand Duke by calling it mediocre. He claimed that his house was much better before taking a look at the desk of the young master and laughing at it. He then picked up the favorite cup of the young master, labeled it as childish, and tossed it like a piece of trash. The annoyed nanny quickly caught it, and her long babysitting experience quickly made her realize that young Renan was an irritating little prick. The boy then took one of Aaron's books and threw it after claiming it was not interesting. Bella quickly caught it. This greatly angered Renan, who realized that Bella was trying to avoid the cleanup task, thus he threw everything on the desk at her. The nanny easily caught every projectile without moving a foot. The boy then threw the pen at Bella, who managed to easily catch it with her mouth due to the experience she acquired while taking care of her two little brothers. Suddenly, the milk she had failed to catch fell on her head. Renan found this scene to be rather laughable. Bella desperately tried to contain her anger by convincing herself that Renan was a small animal that didn't know any better. Aaron asked the boy to stop throwing his things at Bella, whom he urged to go change, yet Renan couldn't understand why Aaron was standing up for a servant. The heroine, baffled by the fact that she was being defended by a toddler, asked her young master to get along with Renan while she went to change and brought them snacks. Aaron agreed. Thinking that this would please his nanny, he proposed to Renan to read a book together, only to find him holding the wooden doll that his father had made for him. Aaron rushed at Renan and affirmed that he was forbidden from touching his doll. Renan used this opportunity to mock him by claiming that he and his doll were very fragile. Thus, he decided to put its resilience to the test by smacking it onto the ground. Just like that, the wooden toy was broken. Angered, Aaron screamed at Renan for breaking his father's gift to him. The boy used this opportunity to mock the Duke's sloppy woodwork, stating that he must have had nothing better to do. Aaron affirmed that his father was a busy man, yet still found time to make him something. This made Renan laugh, who claimed that according to his father, the Duke was discarded by the Emperor and now lives in this remote mansion like an outcast. Mocking Ryan was the last straw for Aaron, who threw himself at Renan. Meanwhile, at the table of the grown-ups, Kale stated to Ryan that he knew him well, as they were childhood friends, which is why he advised him to go with the wishes of the Emperor. This made Ryan assume that the Count was here to scold him. Yet this one affirmed that it wasn't the case and that he was just explaining concern, as the more he gained in fame, the more the Emperor grew fearful of the prophecy. Hearing this, the Duke stated that his friend, who was once filled with dreams, became a lackey to the Emperor. The Count burst at the Duke, claiming that he didn't know anything about him and that he should think about little Aaron, who might grow up without a father. At that moment, Bella, who was going to change her clothes, overheard the conversation and assumed that the Emperor had started plotting against his brother. This also made her realize that Kale was, in fact, no minor character. In her novel, an aristocrat gained a great fortune under the Emperor, and when the Duke uncovered the corruption and tried to expose it to the public, he lost the favor of the Emperor, and since the name of the noble in question was never mentioned, there was a strong chance that he might be the Count, meaning that the events leading to the death of the Duke had started. Even so, she had no way to intervene, as she was still too distant from the Duke. Suddenly, the adults heard Renan screaming in pain. The nanny's first instinct was to rush to the scene, but since she went out to change and get some snacks, she decided to go solidify her alibi before going. She assumed that the children would be fine since their fathers were going. Upon opening the door, Kale immediately went to check on his son. Both children were bruised, yet it was clear that it was Renan who suffered the most damage. This one immediately complained to his father about Aaron striking him. The Count hugged his child and tried to calm him down. Aaron turned his gaze to his father, who demanded an explanation. So the boy explained how Renan had broken his doll. The father began to wonder if his son was protective of the gift he had made him and asked him to elaborate. Kale found it outrageous that a fight had broken out over a wooden doll and promised to send one of his servants to get a new one. Yet, the little boy affirmed that this one was special, as it was a birthday gift that his father had crafted with his own hands. Hearing this, the man stated that they should just turn a blind eye to this dispute after admitting that it was his son's fault, who didn't deserve a beating for this. Yet, little Aaron refused, as Renan had badmouthed his father and thrown milk at his nanny. Thus, he demanded to see him apologize to the three of them. Yet the boy found it ridiculous and refused to apologize to a nameless nanny. Aaron screamed at him to speak about Bella with more respect, as she is someone he holds dear. The nanny who just arrived at the scene found those words to be more touching than a love declaration. When asked about the reason behind her absence, Bella explained that she had gone to change her dirty clothes and was forced to bring in more snacks, seeing how Renan had wasted those she had already brought. When confronted by the Duke, the boy's lack of words made the truth clear. With that, Kale scolded his child and urged him to apologize to Eren. Renan was forced to admit his fault. Seeing how the atmosphere had gotten odd, the Count decided to step out, but before he could leave, his old friend urged him not to badmouth anyone in front of children. And just like that, Cal exited the room along with his son. Bella rushed to check on Eren, fearing him to be as injured as Renan or even more. But upon hearing him claim that he easily won the fight, both adults were left greatly relieved. Bella was particularly happy that the little one's face wasn't hurt. At that moment, the Duke decided to speak. He explained to his child that he would always be in the wrong for striking someone, regardless of the reason. And while the 6-year-old didn't argue, his nanny claimed that if not for violence, Renan would have broken much more. Bella had a hard time believing that a toddler was truly the one speaking as he eloquently apologized to his father, who was scolding him. The Duke decided to go easy on his 6-year-old and asked him to copy the military law 10 times as a punishment, leaving him grateful, while this nanny found this to be some cruel nonsense. But just as she offered her help to the young master, she was startled by the Duke calling out her name. She began to worry that he had heard her, since she was asked to come with him. Later on, the long silent walk made the nanny anxious, right before bumping into her master. At first, she tried to argue that it was his fault for turning around so suddenly, but upon seeing his expression, she cracked under the pressure and apologized for trying to help Eren out. This greatly intrigued Ryan. Only then were they interrupted, as the nanny decided to close the window due to the breeze. The man in front of this beautiful scenery turned around and uttered a single word that didn't make sense to the nanny. Shortly after, the man revealed to Bella how he wished to make her the companion of his son. And when asked to elaborate, the master explained that under his tough raising method, his boy became way too responsible and refused to share his worries with others. Yet Eren seems different with his nanny, according to the Duke, seeing how he treats her like a greatly cherished friend. Bella agreed after being shocked by how sensitive her master was. She then asked him about his destination and when he would return. Yet the Duke refused to answer, as it had something to do with his annoying brother. Bella then asked her boss if he wanted to speak to his son before leaving, as it would make him sad despite his best effort to hide his emotions. She wanted him to tell Eren so he could tell her afterwards. Seeing this, Ryan revealed that he would be heading to the Winard region, which was hit by an earthquake last month. This confirmed the fears of the maiden regarding her master going to see if the funds would be truly delivered to the disaster victims. As Bella bombarded him with questions, the Duke decided to dismiss her. The nanny apologized for overstepping and excused herself. Bella was determined not to let Ryan trigger the events that would lead to his death. In the novel that she had written, the Emperor collects funds, claiming that they were destined to assist a disaster zone, before paying thieves to steal them away as a part of the act. The Emperor would then drop the case after getting all of the money, only to be exposed by the Duke, whom he would exile and later plot to kill. The heroine began regretting writing this horrible and cruel narrative. Only then did she get an idea in order to stop the man from going. At the time of the departure, Owen affirmed to his master that Lord Colin of Winrad had replied and stated that he would meet him at the residence of Kyle, from where they would all transfer the funds together. The Duke stated that he should go immediately and asked Owen if the money destined for the Emperor was ready. But just as the man affirmed that it was hidden in the warehouse, a fire suddenly appeared there, alerting the master. The Duke rushed to check out the situation. He then asked Alan if anyone was injured, and the latter explained that everyone was safe and that the flames were almost out. With that, the master urged his man to put out the fire and check the inside of the warehouse. Later on, upon inspecting the warehouse, the Duke couldn't help but find it odd, as the flames didn't even reach most of it, especially the funds. Only then did he notice a piece of paper. On it was a handwriting that the Duke found rather familiar. Shortly after, Owen explained that according to the investigation, the fire started from a pile of hay near the warehouse. He then stated that, according to the guards, no one who usually enters this place was acting strangely. When asked about the testimony of the guards, Owen explained that they had claimed to have seen Bella, who offered them some strange-looking biscuits. Upon hearing this, the man quickly realized that the handwriting on the paper inside the warehouse belonged to Bella. It was then revealed that the flames were ignited not long after the lady left the scene. The Duke realized that Bella had ignited the fire in order to enter the warehouse and had his little theory regarding what had happened. According to him, the nanny must have made the most likely flammable cookies look terrible on purpose. She then asked the guards to taste them, only for them to refuse the rebuking sweets on purpose. She would then have left them the cookies for later and thrown some kind of igniter into the hay in order to start the fire. Finally, Bella, who was pretending to help out with the flames, must have used the opportunity to slide the note into the warehouse. Yet at the same time, Owen was intrigued by the odd face that his master was making while daydreaming. After being snapped back to reality, the Duke asked Owen if he had found anything when investigating Bella's background. So the guard explained that the nanny's background seemed solid, and the only thing still under investigation was her child and husband, who had left their village without a trace. Despite knowing that what she had done deserved punishment, the Duke couldn't overlook the note that he had found. On it, someone warned him that the Emperor would hire bandits to steal the funds. This left him intrigued, as Bella shouldn't have known about the relief funds, much less about the plan of the Emperor to steal them. So he decided to confront her while wondering if she was trying to help after discovering his ongoing investigation. He then asked Owen about her whereabouts, so he revealed how she must be spectating Aaron's training and asked his master if he wished to summon her. Yet Ryan revealed that he shall personally go and see her in order to see his son. Owen began to think that the Duke was suspicious of the nanny, yet wondered why he decided to go confront her instead of ordering her arrest. Meanwhile, on the training ground, where Aaron was learning how to fence, his dear Nanny, despite her best efforts, was unable to contain her sneeze. The cold feeling in her body made her think that someone was talking about her. Only then did she notice a silhouette behind her. But upon turning around to see who it belonged to, she was startled to see that it was the Duke himself. Ryan immediately asked Bella about the note. She immediately put on a clueless act while wondering about how the Duke unmasked her, only to remember that he was familiar with her handwriting, seeing how she had helped his son copy the military law. Bella then realized that her master wouldn't be able to use an unreadable wet paper against her, which would allow her to deny the allegation. With that, Bella offered her master some water, but just as he was about to refuse, she tripped over a rock and spilled the entire thing on the Grand Duke. The maid also landed on her master as the instructor tried his best to teach the boy. The embarrassed Bella apologized, as she didn't mean to land in this position. Only then did she realize that the master was pushing her head away. Ryan urged her to get up at once, so the startled Bella quickly got back up on her feet. She then proceeded to clean the face of her master while claiming to have tripped by mistake. When asked if she meant to fall on him, the nanny firmly denied it. With that, the Duke revealed that he needed to go to the Emperor's castle soon and that he would interrogate Bella as soon as he returned. And while the nanny was happy that her master didn't seem furious at her, the said master was still thinking about his most recent heart-taking sensation. And later that day at the castle, the Grand Duke presented His Majesty with relief funds for the Winard region and urged him to check if this was the right sum. The ruler ordered Edward to go and inspect the funds. This one agreed and affirmed to his superior that the Grand Duke had done a great job. Ryan stated that he simply did what was asked. With that being said, Edwards closed the chest and affirmed to the ruler that the funds provided by his brother would be of great help to the disaster victims. The Emperor claimed that both he and Ryan deeply care about the people. Before asking him for the reason, he personally escorted the funds to the castle, instead of taking them directly to the disaster region. The Grand Duke claimed that he was unable to do so, as he had dispatched most of his units in the northwest, where a rebellion was rising, according to his intel. This greatly angered the Emperor, as the Duke had deployed his forces without telling him. Yet the Duke affirmed that he had sent a report to His Grace, and assumed that the silence of the Emperor meant that he had indirectly tasked him with taking care of this small inconvenience. The Emperor, who claimed that he must have overlooked the report being too busy, decided to task Count Kale with the transportation of the funds in place of his brother. And so with that being settled, the Duke decided to return home. Yet before exiting the castle, he was stopped by Edwards, who claimed that he seemed too relaxed for someone who didn't get the fund transporting mission. The Duke asked if there was a particular reason he should be feeling as such. So the guard explained how, when he previously visited him and was asked about the destination of the funds, he couldn't help but feel as if the Duke was suspicious of the intent of the Emperor regarding the relief funds. Ryan replied with a smile, claiming that Edwards shouldn't falsely accuse him, as it was but an honest question. And so with that, the Duke excused himself. Edwards knew very well that the Duke was suspicious of his brother, which is why he organized the rebellion of the Northwest in order to keep him away from the fund transfer mission. But seeing how the Duke was oddly relaxed, he decided to put his spy plan in motion. Shortly after, at the mansion of the Grand Duke, the nanny was growing more and more anxious. She began to bitterly regret assisting Aaron with his written punishment. Only then did her master return. Now with her back against the wall, Bella decides to reveal what she needs and cover up what she can. After approaching the nanny, the man asked her about her choice. Thus, she claimed that she would come out clean. With that, he decided to take her somewhere more private in order to talk. Once alone, Bella admitted to having slid the note inside the warehouse that she had set on fire, assuming full responsibility for this problem. The Duke stated that she was a smart girl for not trying to cover up her mistake and for asking about her purpose. Bella revealed that she wanted her words to be heeded, which is why she came up with an ominous scenario instead of telling him directly. This intrigued Ryan, who wanted to know why a simple servant was aware of his secret plan. So this one claimed that she was warned by a friend of hers with good intel. In order to keep her master safe and keep the funds from being stolen, she decided to use this method, as the Duke wouldn't have paid attention to the warning of a servant. In order to get to the bottom of it, the man claimed to be an ally of his brother. Only for Bella to burst out, claiming this to be an obvious lie, and affirm that she likes the tender side that he has towards the people. Hearing this greatly shocked the man, and in that awkward moment, the heroine realized what she had just said. So she rushes to justify herself, claiming that she didn't mean it romantically, yet the situation kept getting more awkward with every word. Seeing this, Ryan decided to stop her, as he had understood her intent. Bella, who knew that her master cared about the funds unlike the other nobles, stated that he would have gone to confront the emperor, which would have ended up putting his life at risk after a dispute. Yet it was the mention of his son that intrigued the Duke. Hearing the nanny propose a scenario where young Aaron, driven by vengeance, would fall into a horrifying madness, left the father truly terrified. Bella then urged her master to protect the money, secretly exchanging it with a box full of rocks before they could be transported. The Grand Duke claimed that he had the same idea before asking the lady how she managed to start a fire without leaving anything behind. The irritated Bella, who wanted to keep this trick for herself, had no choice but to reveal it. The author decided to share her science by explaining that one can obtain a precipitate of calcium phosphate by boiling milk, which can result in phosphorus when mixed with quartz and carbon powder. Bella, who couldn't help but feel embarrassed seeing how her boss wasn't speaking, resumed by explaining that phosphorus could be easily ignited when exposed to sunlight, making it ideal to create delayed fires. Just like that, the modern-day author who learned this for the sake of her next work ended up revealing her knowledge to the Grand Duke. But just as she assumed that she was out of trouble, the Grand Duke decided to ask her one final question. He decided to confront her about the fact that she was well educated despite being illiterate, according to her file. It was at this moment that the heroine realized that she had messed up. Now in a pickle, she decided to quickly come up with a lie. Bella claimed that, like many commoner families, hers was too poor to afford her education, but she still decided to attend his lessons in secret, as she was passionate about science. She then proceeded to shed some crocodile tears, while claiming that she had to play the illiterate in order to keep her secret away from her parents. Bella then proceeded to state that her teacher must have really liked her, seeing how much he had accepted to teach her. With that, the master heard the full excuse of his servant. This one then stated that the technique that she used to start the fire is commonly used by street performers, and that he might have never seen it due to the fact that he was always at the front. Unable to tell if the lady was lying or not, he claimed that he would take her word for it, as this matter doesn't seem to be a source of major troubles. This upset Bella, as it meant that her master didn't actually believe her story. Despite her goodwill, the master couldn't turn a blind eye to the destruction, so he decided to appoint someone to take care of his son while she stayed confined in her room for 3 days. He then asked her to use her punishment time in order to make the phosphorus powder. At first, the nanny assumed that the Duke assigned this task to keep her away from boredom, so he explained how he simply needed this powder that would be a great asset for his plan, and that Owen would provide her with the materials. With that, the Grand Duke dismissed the nanny, as he was now tired. And so just as she was about to leave the room, happy that she got to keep her job, the master decided to ask her one more question. Bella then did her best to hide her anger as she asked the Duke if he needed anything else. Yet when he asked her if she had hurt herself while falling, she had a hard time comprehending what he meant. Seeing this, Ryan decided to drop the matter. He then dismissed the nanny. Shortly after, on the way to her room, Bella tried to figure out what her master was referring to, only to remember that she had fallen over him just today. This made Bella realize that the Duke was referring to that very moment. Our heroine then began to blush as she realized that her master had, in fact, tried to catch her when she fell. It was now nighttime, and she was starving. The protagonist in Time Out was unable to think about anything but food. Seeing how everyone must be asleep, she decided to sneak out of her room in order to get some food. Bella blamed Owen for her hunger, as despite the demanding task she was assigned, he only brought her small portions to eat. On the way to the kitchen, Bella stopped for a brief moment in order to admire the bright moonlight, only to see something shocking outside the window. The other nanny, Evelyn, was alone outside in the middle of the night. After seeing no one else in the garden, she urged the other person to come out. Suddenly, a shady cloaked figure emerged from behind her. Evelyn asked him the reason he had called for this sudden meeting. The man pulled out a small pouch and claimed that the boss tasked him with giving it to her. Evelyn was now greatly pleased, as she had finally gotten the man to take Bella out of the picture. Hearing this, the figure revealed that her boss was urging her not to make any hasty moves, and that he was displeased to hear that her foolishness had made her lose her nanny position. He then decided to remind her that they were working under a cruel man who could easily take her head in case of failure. Yet this didn't bother Evelyn, who urged the figure to tell the master to prepare the Duke's bounty. Meanwhile, hiding behind a tree, Bella was too far to hear the conversation. But just as she was thinking about getting closer, she was suddenly seen by someone. Startled, she turned around to confront this person, only to realize that it was none other than little Erin, who asked for the reason she was not in her room. Bella was happy that Evelyn and her colleague didn't notice her, and she decided to get the little master away from them immediately. With that, the nanny asked the little boy to come with her in silence. Once safe, Bella asked Eren the reason he was wandering the mansion alone at this hour. So the boy explained how he needed to use the bathroom, how he decided to go alone, as he didn't want to bother the deep slumber of the maid, and how he was surprised to see Bella here. He then rushed to hug the nanny and claimed that he had greatly missed her during the past 2 days. Flattered, Bella affirmed that she had missed him as well, as she then proceeded to pat his head. Hearing this greatly rejoiced the boy. She then proceeded to tell him how she was always worried about him and his well-being, only to snap out of the moment and affirm to Eren that it was always necessary for him to always be escorted by someone, as his father would be devastated if anything happened to him. With that, Eren stated that he will never wander alone ever again. Bella then proposed to keep the events of tonight a secret between them. Little Eren agreed. With that, the promise to keep the secret was sealed in the most official and sacred way. And so, as the nanny took the young master to his room, she began to think of how Evelyn obviously had bad intentions in mind and decided to have her out of the house as soon as possible. As the next day dawned on the residence of Count Kyle, the guard captain of the Count, Hector, urged his men to hurry up as they needed to go to the Imperial Palace soon. At that moment, the Count arrived and asked his captain if anything was missing. So this one claimed that he would check once again in order to make sure that nothing would be missing when Count Kale arrives for the banquet. Hearing this, the Count urged his men to take their time while checking the boxes and to make sure none were left behind. The guards rushed to obey the words of their master. At that moment, the younger sister of the Count, Daisy, rushed to her brother, claiming that she was looking for him. Hector almost lost his composure in front of the stunning lady while the Count asked her to come closer. Daisy asked her brother for the reason he was standing here when they needed to prepare themselves for the imperial banquet. The man laughed, claiming that they still had some time before leaving. Yet his little sister urged him to help her choose her dress. The brother jokingly asked if she was doing all of this for the emperor, which somewhat triggered his little sister, as he knew fully well who she was trying to impress. Thus, Daisy showed him the picture of 2 dresses and asked him to help her choose the one that would suit her the best. Yet the Count affirmed that his opinion was meaningless, as the dress needed to suit the taste of Edward's in order to tease her even more. Only then did someone ask her to go with the pink dress. The guard captain politely gave his opinion and claimed that she would look better in pink. After hearing the opinion of Hector, a happy Daisy decided to quickly go try it on. But as she rushed to change herself, the Count urged her once again not to run. With that being said, the Count decided to make his leave and asked the guard captain to take care of the rest. But as his master exited the scene, Hector began to ask himself why a flower like Daisy fell for Edwards. Later that night at the Imperial Palace, Count Kale was praised for all of the efforts he demonstrated during the fund collecting mission. For this reason, the emperor prepared a banquet in his honor in order to congratulate him in advance. Yet the noble affirmed that he wasn't worthy of such high praise and that he was only doing his duty. The emperor asked the Count to stop with the formalities and take a seat before turning to Edwards. He then proceeded to ask him to take a seat at the table as well, seeing how helpful he had shown himself to be. But as soon as Edwards accepted, His Majesty ordered him to sit next to Daisy. He ordered the Count to sit on his left side so Edwards could sit between him and Daisy. But just as Edwards was about to give his opinion, the emperor gave him a dark glare and asked him if he was displeased by his command. With that, the redhead had no choice but to obey his master's will, which left him quite pleased. Shortly after, as the places were exchanged, Daisy immediately initiated a conversation with Edwards. She excitedly revealed how she wanted to be taught riding and asked Edwards to be her instructor, as he was renowned for his skills. The man affirmed that he would have gladly accepted to become her teacher if it weren't for the laws of the empire that clearly stated that only a female instructor could teach a lady. Thus, it would be impossible for him to heed her request. And before Daisy could even reply, Edwards offered to introduce her to a talented female teacher. The lady was greatly disappointed. So seeing this, the gentleman claimed that he would stay by her side in case she found the experience terrifying. Hearing this quickly shifted the mood of the lady. After the interaction, the emperor pointed out to the Count how his guard and his sister looked well together. So the noble attributed the credits of this good match to the emperor. This one then asked about the matter he had asked him to take care of. So the Count asked the emperor to rest assured, as everything was under control. With that, the emperor expressed how relieved he was to have him and Edwards by his side. Meanwhile, at a military camp, in the quiet of the night, one of the guards welcomed Hector. The guard captain then revealed that their mission had been surprisingly difficult and asked for some strong recruits to replace the exhausted ones. The man agreed and revealed that the butler had prepared food for the guards who worked hard and asked them to wait for orders while enjoying warmth and a bite. Hector asked his man to go rest, while the guard guided the men to their tent. With that, the recruits went to shield themselves from the cold night. Meanwhile, inside the warm walls of the Imperial Palace, the drunk emperor called Edwards. This one quickly stood up in order to receive his orders. The emperor asked his guard to escort Daisy back home while he discussed the rest of his business with her brother. With that, the lady excused herself and thanked the gentleman who helped her stand up. Shortly after, on the way to the estate, A blushing Daisy asked Edwards if he was fond of her dress. She was left particularly happy, as this one affirmed that it suited her well, so she revealed how she had worn it for him exclusively. Edwards considered those words to be high praise, yet when Daisy asked him if he believed in destined love, Edwards was left shocked. He had a hard time responding to the lady, as upon hearing her question, only one figure came to his mind. After thinking for some time, he claimed that he didn't believe in such things, so when asked about his opinion regarding romance, he claimed that he had always been absorbed by his duty and never spared love a thought. But just as Daisy was offering herself as a candidate, while claiming that he needed to think about marriage, he interrupted her, claiming that they had arrived. With that, Daisy was left disappointed. With that, Edwards quickly got out of the carriage and decided to help her descend. But as soon as the lady set foot on the ground, someone came rushing to her. One of the servants alerted her of a fire in the kitchen, leaving her and her escort startled. All members of the estate staff rushed to extinguish the giant flames. Daisy asked for an explanation. So one of the servants explained that the fire that had now reached the hall must have started from the kitchens, where they had been drying wood and hay. Edwards asked if the kitchen and the hall were the only places currently on fire. The servant confirmed, and explained that he was glad that the flames they were having a hard time putting out still hadn't reached the barracks. He then revealed that they had sent someone to alert the master, but didn't know when he would return. Seeing how the barracks where the money was stored were safe, Edwards decided not to alert his master in order not to incur his wrath by interrupting his pleasure. Thus, he asked them to recall the one they had sent to call back Count Kale, who was drinking with his majesty. And so, as everyone focused on the fire at hand, the spies who started it decided to quickly execute their plan. Thus began the quiet exchange of chests. Later that night, after the flames had been put out, the returning count screamed that no one had alerted him about this major problem. So Hector explained how the one they had sent to get him was recalled by Daisy and Edwards, who didn't want to interrupt his drink with the Emperor. Even so, Kale took it as an insult that no one warned him that his home was burning down. With that as the count ordered, the guard captain started investigating the source of the flames. As soon as he returned, someone entered the scene, as this was none other than Count Phyllis Collin, the ruler of the Winrad region, who hadn't seen the count, who looked exactly the same, in 10 years. Kyle was surprised by the arrival of the man and claimed that he volunteered to collect the funds for his region after hearing about the situation, before claiming that they should depart immediately. With that, he ordered Hector to prepare the boxes before turning to Count Collin and stating that they should depart now. In reality, Kyle found this man to be pathetic for requesting funds 1 month after the earthquake, and was happy that he would have to solve his own problems once the money was stolen. Sometime later, while on the way, Count Collin began to praise the Emperor for worrying about his domain and even raised funds to compensate for the destruction. Count Kale played along while wondering if it was innocence or stupidity that prevented him from doubting the intentions of his majesty. Count Collin began to talk about how he had worked under 3 rulers, with the first 2 showing love for their subjects. He then affirmed that he was glad to see the current one finally following in their footsteps. When suddenly, the unexpected happened. A guard rushed to the nobles and alerted them about 20 incoming bandits charging at them. Kale, who was happy to see the plan being executed smoothly, pretended to be surprised. Thus, he urged Count Collin to flee with the boxes while he tried to distract them with one, yet this one was determined to defend the relief funds. Only then did the bandits arrive. The ruler of Winrad immediately drew out his weapon, seeing how the enemy had them surrounded. This greatly worried Kyle, as this old man, who was acting recklessly, might provoke the bandits. As the leader of the thugs affirmed to his subordinates that they had hit the jackpot, Count Kale began to beg for the lives of his allies and gave them the chests. Yet when the bandit opened the chest, he was shocked to find it filled with rocks. This greatly angered him, thinking that he had been fooled, as his employers had agreed to give him a share of the loot. With that, he ordered his men to leave none of them alive, and so began the massacre. In the heat of battle, Count Kale urged Count Kyle to flee with the money, as his people in Winrad desperately needed it. And so, confused about this entire situation, the Count shouted at the thieves and reminded them that this should be but a simple act. Only to then realize in horror, as he looked at Count Collin, who had just lost an arm and was on the brink of death, that the plan had derailed. Kyle was horrified and decided to act at once. He quickly got off his high horse in order to shield the old man from the final blow and cut down the thief that was about to take his life. Kyle then turned to check on Collin, who urged him once again to flee with the money. Seeing how the bandits were truly attacking them, Count Kale began to assume that they were betrayed by Edwards. Only then did he hear help on the way and assume that it was him. Yet the arriving savior wasn't the one he had expected, as it was none other than the Grand Duke Winthrop. Against these reinforcements, the bandits stood no chance. Thus, the few lucky ones decided to retreat. The Duke felt glad to have decided to watch the ambush from afar. He then rushed to the injured Count in order to check up on him and urged Owen to get him a doctor at once. Kyle then asked the Duke how he was able to find them so fast. So Ryan claimed that he decided to join the two of them as soon as he took care of the rebellion, as it weighed on his consciousness to refuse a mission given to him by the Emperor. The Duke then explained that there might be more thieves lurking around, and that the dead and injured needed to be transferred to Winrad at once before asking Kyle if he would like to come with them. Seeing the man decline, the Count didn't press him any further. With that, the Grand Duke ordered the thieves to be escorted to the capital. And as soon as he left, the Count crumbled to the ground. He began to panic as he wondered what excuse could appease the Emperor. With that, Hector approached Count Kyle and asked him for orders. Following the original plan, this is where they should have decided to go to the Emperor and leave Count Colin to return with nothing for his people. This made him assume that Edwards must have lost control of the situation, as the thieves who were supposed to fake their assault ended up spilling blood. With that, he decided to go to Winard before Count Colin in order to report the ambush. And so, the man stood up and urged his man to keep walking. Later on in Winard, where the people were starving, the soldiers finally arrived. Kyle was welcomed by Solid Winard, the second son of Count Colin. This confused Kale, seeing how the second son was wearing a soldier's uniform. So this one proudly explained that in order to maintain safety and peace in the realm of his father, he assumed a temporary position of security captain. Kale did his best to hide his true thoughts, as he considered this behavior unworthy of a noble. He then claimed that his injured man needed treatment, but as soon as he mentioned the funds, the second son thought that he was referring to the ones who had just arrived. He then explained to the shocked Count that the relief funds arrived not long ago, before suggesting to let him check. The chest was then opened, revealing the relief funds intact. This greatly shocked Kyle, as the money that was supposed to be delivered to the Emperor in secret had arrived at its official destination. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, His Majesty was left baffled. He left the room angry, asking Edwards to bring him an explanation. As it turns out, the thieves had brought the stone chests to the Emperor. After receiving the funds, the Winard region's condition greatly improved. The bandits were imprisoned, and the ruler whose plans were foiled was the subject of an unyielding rage. Even so, he hid his anger and praised the Duke for his heroism. One day after this incident, the Crown had the prisoners executed, and just like that, neither Edwards nor Count Kale was able to understand what happened. Sometime later at the mansion of the Grand Duke, Bella was peacefully working in the kitchen. Evelyn entered the room and asked the heroine with a smile what she was doing. This one coldly replied by stating that she was preparing something for Aaron to eat after his lessons while wondering about her colleague Ike's intentions. Evelyn asked for forgiveness once again for trying to frame her. So Bella explained that she should be asking their master for forgiveness instead. Evelyn asked Bella, who was only second to Alan, to try and talk to him about her position, as the work of a maid is tiresome for her age. This made the protagonist smile after realizing that Evelyn was about to execute her scheme and that she had the chance to discover it early. Thus, she agreed to talk with Alan about her position. With that, Evelyn thanked Bella for her kindness, yet little did she know that Bella had something in store for her. Meanwhile, the teacher explained to Aaron how there were 3 yellow cats and 2 blue ones inside a house. She then asked him about the probability that, in case one of them escapes, it would be blue. It didn't take long for the toddler to find the right answer, which was 60%. But just as the satisfied teacher decided to attack the next problem, Ern's father, who was passing by, overheard him explain that it wasn't necessarily 60%. This left Ryan confused. His child began to claim that the answer might be different. The teacher asked him to elaborate. So Aaron explained how since the door is locked, they wouldn't know if one or more of the cats went missing, meaning that they needed to open the door to make sure. Hearing this, the shocked teacher claimed this to be sheer nonsense. He then revealed that he had learned about this experiment made long ago by a man named Shord Dinger from a story told to him by Bella. At that moment, this one arrived at the study room and asked the master for the reason he was standing outside. And when confronted about the knowledge she had given to his son, she explained that it was just some facts she had learned from stories while wondering about what was going on. She was confused about the behavior of her master. This one then asked her about the Schardinger cat, and before she could explain, they overheard Aaron explain that this experiment's moral was not to make hasty conclusions. The boy then claimed that this was even more important when one was a leader, seeing how his decision would be affecting lives. And while Bella was certain to have never spoken about any of this, the master was satisfied with this explanation. With that, the Grand Duke expressed his gratitude towards the nanny for her help with the funds and offered to grant her one request as a reward, which left her intrigued. So the Duke explained how he could grant her a big sum of money or even grant her a vacation. In reality, Bella's dearest wish was to see him make it out alive, yet saying it out loud wouldn't amount to anything. With that, Bella stated that she doesn't have any request in mind and that she would need some time to think about it. Thus, the master agreed. But right as she was about to enter the room, he suddenly stopped her. The Duke claimed that he could grant her one wish immediately if it was small, so she affirmed that she does have a request of this sort. Bella revealed how she had always wanted to see the fantasy-like place that is rumored to be behind the estate of the Duke. With that, he agreed and asked her to prepare herself. Bella was surprised that he decided to grant her wish immediately. A little later, in front of the gates, Bella, in her blue dress, felt like this trip was a little rushed, seeing how it had been a while since she had gone out. At that moment, the Duke arrived. Everything was ready, yet the heroine was intrigued by the fact that there was only one horse. Yet when asked if she knew how to ride one, she affirmed that she didn't. With that, the nanny had answered her own question, and so he invited her to mount with him. This was rather unexpected for the heroine. The Duke then asked her not to move before grabbing her by the waist and picking her up. With that, he asked her to hold on, and before the nanny could even find something to use as a handle, the horse suddenly began to move. And with that being said, the two of them went on their way. Shortly after, Bella laid her eyes on a magnificent prairie filled with flowers. For the first time, the heroine was experiencing her first vacation. Back in the real world, she used to complain about how she worked days and nights, while others with the same position and higher wages enjoyed their time off. Yet after taking a look at the picture of her family that needed her help, she would always do her best to suppress her jealousy and keep on working. And now, for the first time, the heroine was free to finally feel the embrace of nature, which filled her with joy. The Duke couldn't help but notice how happy the nanny seemed. Suddenly, the horse stumbled upon a stone. The beast was startled, and as the master did his best to control it, the nanny suddenly grabbed him. This surprised the Duke. He then proceeded to ask the nanny if she was also startled. Now embarrassed, she struggled to explain how she was scared to fall off the back of the horse. Only then did she notice that she was holding on to Ryan, so she quickly apologized and claimed that it wasn't her intention to grab him. The Duke stated that no harm was done and allowed her to keep grabbing him, only to refuse at first. But as the horse began to move quickly, she found herself too scared to hold it by the saddle and asked her master if his offer was still available. Ryan smiled and affirmed that she could hold on as the two of them resumed their journey. Some time later, the nanny and the Duke arrived at their destination. He then proceeded to earn her thanks by helping her get down from the horse. Bella claimed this place to be magnificent. She then picked up some dandelion flowers and claimed them to be beautiful while comparing them to falling snow. She then turned to Ryan and asked him if he agreed with her. Shocked by this view, the Grand Duke stated that this is a pleasing spectacle. Only then did Bella apologize, as she had forgotten herself. The Duke affirmed that she doesn't have to be so strict about the formalities if no one else is around. So when asked to elaborate, Ryan explained to Bella that she was free to treat him as a simple friend. The heroine accepted and affirmed to the Grand Duke that he was forbidden from going back on his word. She was happy to hear that he wanted her to address him as a friend, as it meant that she had earned his trust. The Duke then grew quite confused as the nanny handed him some flowers. Bella wanted to show him something gently beautiful by blowing on it. And so when asked if he liked it by the pretty lady, the Duke smiled and affirmed that it was breathtaking. The two of them then proceeded to spend the day making flower crowns, throwing the dandelion seeds at each other, and getting them out of each other's hair. After this long day filled with games and fun, Ryan asked Bella about her life before arriving at the mansion, yet she claimed it to be quite boring and unworthy of mention. Even so, the Duke insisted on hearing it in order to see if it was as boring as she claimed it to be. Bella was surprised and explained that her life story was no short tale. She revealed that most of her life was dedicated to raising money. The heroine explained how she had two younger siblings, and she was forced to become an adult at a young age for the sake of her mother, who worked tirelessly to ensure them a good life. In order to help her mother, who was growing weaker due to the constant heavy load of work, she had to abandon her education and find herself a job. At first, she assumed that a decent income would solve all of her family's problems, yet this is where the worst happened. As Ryan grew intrigued, the heroine revealed how she had collapsed from overwork and that, in the end, she dedicated her existence to her family without sparing a day for herself. Now looking back at her life, she regretted not asking her brothers to take part-time jobs and living a little instead of solely focusing on money. After that, the Duke proposed to give her some time off to go see them, yet she explained that it won't be necessary as some circumstances were preventing her from going back. With that, the nanny asked her boss to always make sure to rest when working hard, as a healthy body and spirit were a key factor when taking care of someone else. Those words resonated deep into the heart of the Grand Duke. At that moment, he was snapped back to reality by Bella grabbing his hand. This left him quite surprised. She then proceeded to excitedly point him to the sunset that she found stunning. And so, Bella turned to her master and expressed gratitude from the bottom of her heart for taking her to this beautiful place. In front of such a joyful soul, Ryan couldn't help but smile. With that, Bella and Ryan watched the sun calmly set over this peaceful place. Later that night at the capital, Edwards asked the other person why he had asked to meet him in such a location. He confirmed that the matter was clear and that the betrayal of the bandits was the result of their own greed to keep all the gold for themselves. Even so, Kale claimed that he dropped the matter at first as it was a huge mess, yet after thinking about it, something felt off. Edwards assumed that the man was accusing him of betrayal, so he decided to remind him that he was the Emperor's favorite. Yet the Count affirmed that he wasn't accusing him and that he suspects the Grand Duke, who must have started the fire at his estate, switched the chests. Edwards found this to be a bunch of nonsense, as Count Kale himself claimed that the fire was an accident according to his own investigation. At that moment, the Count realized that Edwards wasn't listening to him, as he claimed that he just had to watch over the chests. Kale then claimed that the Emperor asked them to resolve this problem as soon as possible before claiming that Edwards must have ordered the bandits to kill him, as he was scared that he would take his place by the side of the Emperor. Edwards found this nonsense to be rather amusing, as he dared the man to go complain to the Emperor about it before making his leave. But as he began to walk away, the Count affirmed that he was capable of replacing him. Yet upon seeing him walk away, the Count realized that Edwards must have planned things out with His Majesty, but wondered why he was being so calm about this mess. Meanwhile, back at the flower field, Ryan affirmed to Bella that she was unique and that he wished to look inside her heart in order to see if he was inside. And with that, Bella and Ryan's lips came closer to each other, only for her to wake up shortly after. The protagonist was intrigued by this dream. At first, she felt glad that this wasn't just her imagination running wild, but then she tried to convince herself that she couldn't fall for someone born from the fruit of her mind, no matter how perfect he may be. At the same time, in the chamber of the Grand Duke, he found himself unable to get Bella's bright smile out of his mind. He then tried to remind himself that she is still a total mystery for him. The Duke assumed that he was feeling this way due to the fact that he hadn't gone out for a long time and that he had never seen such a smile before. Thus, both Rayan and Bella tried to shake off their feelings by going to bed. Sometime later at the Imperial Palace, the Emperor claimed that he hadn't seen the Duke in a long time, as he wasn't able to give him any task and that he had a big mission for him in stock. The Grand Duke asked His Majesty to give his command. Thus, the Emperor ordered him to go join an officer at the northwest gate of the palace in order to receive the people who cherish him so much. Hearing this shocked the Grand Duke, as it made him realize something important. Chapter 18. Seeing his reaction, the Emperor asked him if he had any objection regarding his orders, only for the Grand Duke to accept them and claim that he would fulfill his duty. The area located to the northwest of the palace was a dirty slum filled with poor people. It was reeking of brothels and homelessness. No one looked at this poor area that was so populated that every day at least 2 bodies are found in its waters. Despite the fact that no one even wanted to speak about this place, the Grand Duke went to its civil affairs office. Owen was by his side when entering the office. Yet, once inside, they were met with one ugly room. Owen was disgusted and covered his nose while claiming this place to be deplorable. He angrily tried to argue that despite his jealousy, the Emperor had no right to send his master, the war hero, to such a lowly place. With that, the Duke urged him to keep his opinions for himself while on the soil of the capital. He then asked him to get some men for the cleanup, and also asked for some necessities. Owen screamed to his master that he shouldn't have to work in this miserable place that the Emperor put him in order to make fun of him, and that no one would even come here. Only then did an old lady enter the office. She had heard that this was a place where the commoners could come in order to solve their problems. With that, the Grand Duke welcomed her while his subordinate rushed to have her seated. When asked about her problem, the old lady revealed how she went to buy eggs for the birthday of her granddaughter and how the merchant kicked her out, refusing to give her the eggs she had bought from him. Hearing this, Ryan explained that he would register her case. And so as the old lady began to complain about how her family couldn't afford 3 meals per day and that her grandchild enjoys her egg porridge, Owen began to think about how scandalous it was to put his master, who was a renowned commander and a war hero, in such a low and dirty place. Some days had passed since then, and numerous people had decided to go check out the Civil Affairs office. Every tongue was now speaking about the Grand Duke, who was in charge of the office and solved all the problems alike. One of the men waiting began to wonder if the Duke could help him find his lost clothes set, so the one in front of him revealed how he had easily helped him with his pet problem. Meanwhile, inside the office, a man just finished telling the Grand Duke about the one who hit him. With that, Rayan marked the letter with his seal and asked the man to get it to the police station so that they could take care of his problem. With that, the man was left deeply grateful towards Rayan. With that, he asked for the next person to speak up, and upon hearing a cheerful voice addressing him, the Grand Duke immediately recognized it as familiar. This was none other than Bella, who was here to deliver the lunch of her master. Later on, at the ducal mansion, Bella was glad to have finally delivered the Duke his food. But just as she began to think of how she was now taking care of the father, just as much as his son, she noticed something odd. Numerous citizens were at the gates of the residence, while the guard desperately tried to explain that they were forbidden from entering. Seeing this greatly intrigued Bella. The guard then asked for her help, as the many citizens who wished to thank the Duke for solving their issues were going to flood the castle. With that being said, she decided to put her decades' worth of experience as an office worker to good use in order to solve this problem. A couple of hours later, the knight had successfully cloaked the mansion with its starry wings. At supper time, Alan couldn't help but point out how exhausted the master was and urged him to go to bed early. Yet the Grand Duke refused, claiming that he had to examine the reports regarding the polluted river before asking about Aaron. So the butler happily explained how Aaron was training seriously as usual and reassured him that he was in the good hands of Bella. The Duke then asked about the manuscript on his table, so Alan explained how Bella had written this for the master, seeing how many commoners with presents sought to enter the mansion in order to thank him for his work. According to him, Bella, who must have been worried about the presence of dangerous items, made this list in order to sort the gifts out with a small recap regarding the donors. Alan explained that this list would help them run a smooth investigation in case any suspicious item is found, and that Bella becomes very detail-oriented if a matter concerns the Grand Duke. Upon taking a look at the list, Ryan was left quite impressed. Alan had a hard time following as his master stated that her knowledge and skills far surpassed those of a regular nanny. With that, the Duke suggested asking for the opinion of the heroine regarding official matters from now on. Chapter 99. Some days later, the staff of the mansion were rushing to finish the preparation before the return of their master. Bella then approached Alan, who was looking for her, and was asked not to forget the crucial rice cakes for the Andrian festival while making the food. The heroine was left shocked as she had written herself. On a cold winter that occurred a century ago, the female knight Andrea led her army in order to go fight the monsters. Due to the harsh cold they had to endure while surviving the beasts, the people decided to create this festival in honor of their courage and sacrifice. It is said that during those dark days the knights had nothing to eat but rice cakes, which is why it became a tradition to prepare them for the festival. At that moment, our heroine realized that she didn't know how to make rice cakes. Only then did she remember that Evelyn had asked her to talk about Alan regarding her position, so she proposed to let her back in the kitchen while she tended to Aaron. The butler couldn't care less as long as everything would be ready in time. This greatly pleased Bella, who was convinced that by giving a chance to Evelyn, she would undoubtedly reveal her true colors, which is why she decided to observe her carefully. Meanwhile, the maid in question was cleaning the garden when the heroine rushed to her. Seeing this, Evelyn pointed out that she had a lot of work on her hands, only for Bella to explain that after seeing her seem regretful for such a long time, she had finally spoken to Alan, who agreed to let her return to the kitchen in order to prepare the rice cakes. Evelyn fell to her knees and thanked the protagonist from the bottom of her heart. Bella helped her get back on her feet and cheerfully wished her fortune when making the rice cakes. The owner, with ill intentions, affirmed that she would. Sometime later at the residence of Count Kamar, Edwards entered the living room, where two important members of his family were enjoying themselves. This sight greatly displeased Edwards, who decided to leave at once, only to be then spotted by his older brother Theodore and called out for his short stay. Edwards tried to argue that he needed to make his leave in order to complete a pending task given to him by the emperor. After hearing this, his father, Count Herbert Kamar, screamed at him to have some manners and to at least greet him and Theodore. These words filled Edwards with rage, and despite all the anger flowing through his veins, he retained himself and claimed that he was just trying to not interrupt his father and brother's good time. Theodore used this opportunity to bring up the rumors regarding his brother, who must enjoy similar pleasures by the side of the emperor, and call him out for acting so nobly in front of them. So Edwards explained that he just does his best in order to not interfere with the pleasure of his majesty. Theodore used this chance to claim that his brother follows the emperor blindly, and that despite all the power that he has, he must sacrifice himself if asked to do so. In the end, the drunken elder brother couldn't contain his anger any longer and demanded to know what nonsense his brother had spouted in the ears of the emperor, so that he refused to give them an audience. Yet Edwards affirms that he had never talked about his family in the presence of his majesty. Yet, Theodore didn't believe him. He decided to remind his brother that forbidding him from talking to the emperor wouldn't allow him to become the heir to the Kamar County, and that he was an illegitimate child born to a low woman. After hearing this, Edwards didn't think twice before hitting his brother. As hatred filled his eyes, he affirmed that he wouldn't allow his mother to be disrespected. The count began to scream at him for punching his brother. Edwards tried to argue that Theodore was talking ill about his mother, yet the father couldn't care less. Count Kamar forbade his illegitimate child from even speaking of his mother, claiming her to be a disgrace to the name of his household. He then proceeded to call Edwards a disgrace as well, as in the end he was her child. Edwards found those words rather entertaining. He then smiled as he threatened to warn his stepmother about the count, who sent someone to search once again for the woman he supposedly loathes so much. Count Herbert was greatly triggered by this threat and ordered his men to beat up his son. Yet after being surrounded, the relaxed Edwards reminded Count Kamar and his heir that they would be surely punished for daring to harm the right hand of the crown. With that, the count was filled with anger seeing how his hands were tied. He then ordered his illegitimate child to exit his home right away, as he couldn't bear to look at him. Thus, Edwards exited the room without making a fuss. Seeing how angry his father seemed, Theodore rushed to appease him. He reminded his father that they had a spy of their own inside the mansion of Duke Winthrop, and that they could win the favor of the emperor once the spy kills the duke during the festival. Edwards, who was eavesdropping on their conversation, was shocked to see that his family had also infiltrated the house of Rayan and was determined not to let them take his head. The next day, the angered screams of the emperor echoed throughout the entire castle. The concerned Edwards asked about the problem at hand. So the ruler handed him the letter that was sent by the treasurer. Upon reading it, the guard was shocked to see that the Grand Duke was requesting a phenomenal sum for some major maintenance. This greatly angered the emperor, as the one he had sent to the slums in order to humble and silence was now asking for financial support. Edwards proposed to simply decline the request, yet the emperor affirmed that the problem wasn't as plain as it seemed. With that, he sent Edwards to the northwest gate and ordered him to come back with a report. And so, later that day in the civilian district of the northwest gate, Edwards and his escort began to walk around town. They looked left and right in order to examine the place. After examining the crystal clear water of the lake, both men had a hard time believing that they were in the dirty northwest of the imperial castle. And while the blonde one was wondering if these improvements would please the emperor or incur his wrath, Edwards urged the young man to allow him to focus in silence. Only then did he notice something intriguing. Having recognized the uniform of the Grand Duke's men, he decided to follow them. Shortly after arriving at their destination, the men of the Duke ordered a business to be closed as it was accused of fraud. The shopkeeper screamed at the guards, claiming that this shop was the property of the eldest son of Count Kamar, who would surely cause them trouble. Edwards was shocked to hear that this establishment belonged to Theodore. And so, seeing how his brother would be even more determined to kill the Count if his shop were closed, he decided to stop them from reporting this. Later that day at the imperial castle, Edwards reported to His Majesty the great developments that happened at the northwest gate and claimed that the region would prosper even further if the Duke got the money he asked for. The emperor was annoyed by his brother's hard work and theorized that he wishes to be rewarded for it. Even so, Edwards pointed out that the improvement of the poor region could be to their advantage, as it means they could ask for higher tasks regardless of the intentions of the Duke. So the emperor angrily explained that he didn't need to provide better life conditions in order to ask for higher taxes, and that the Duke wasn't doing this for him. The emperor was growing even more suspicious of his golden brother and affirmed that he won't tolerate his behavior that makes him appear better than him any longer regardless of it being intentional or not. As Edwards asked his master if he had any mission for him, this one smiled as he ordered him to release Chester. This command horrified Edwards, as this man had killed more than a dozen people. Chester was the man that the Duke personally captured at the border. This man even blamed Rayan for the death of his wife and child, which is why he was obsessed with him. The emperor wanted to use the degenerate killer to take the life of his own brother and promised Edwards a reward in case of success. Despite everything, Edwards decided to submit himself to the will of his master while thinking about how everyone was trying to kill the Grand Duke. Later on, inside the civilian district of the Northwest Gate, our heroine was following Evelyn in silence. Yet as this one entered a remote alley, she looked around in order to make sure she wasn't followed. Thus, she had almost spotted Bella. With that, Evelyn entered the dark alley. There, she met with a shady figure wearing a cloak. The hiding protagonist began to think that Evelyn would try to poison the food once again, seeing how she had purchased a medicine bottle. When suddenly an acquaintance poked her shoulder. Bella did her best to retain her startled scream, only to fail miserably. The alerted Evelyn turned around, only to find a young maiden in the arms of a good-looking gentleman. Seeing this, she dismissed her contact before quietly disappearing into the alley. Bella was baffled to see Evelyn escape her sight. Edwards claimed that they weren't exactly close enough to embrace each other in such a way, so Bella apologized and explained that she did this in order to not get caught. As Edwards claimed that she was acting like a nanny for a certain someone, she affirmed that he was able to nail her job but got the client wrong. But just as she was about to excuse herself, he suddenly stopped her and asked for her name, as last time he was unable to get it when she asked for his. In reality, our heroine had 3 names, the first being her real name, the second being the name of her character, and lastly the one she was living by. In the end, she introduced herself to Edwards as Bella, as he claimed her name to be memorable. And so with that being said, the lady decided to return home, when suddenly, Edwards grabbed her by the wrist. The gentleman proposed to personally escort her home, as he just happened to be going in the same direction as the one he feared would get lost. With that, Bella began to think about her answer, as despite Edward being an antagonist, she was happy to see him, so she decided to use him to get some intel on the Emperor. And so, the protagonist agreed to let the villain walk her back home. And so, sometime later, as the two walked together side by side, Bella was intrigued by the weird mood between them. She then noticed that the face that she couldn't help but find handsome seemed uneasy. Thus, she pointed out how preoccupied he seemed and offered to listen to his problem. Hearing this, Edwards decided to pass his own issue off as that of a friend. He explained that this friend was tasked with freeing a terrifying killer who would take many more lives, and that he was torn between his conscience and duty. And so, as he turned to the lady and asked for a solution to the problem, this one froze in front of this handsomeness. Edwards was left surprised as Bella claimed that he should just free the criminal before claiming that his imprisonment was a waste of a national treasure who could be released anywhere. The man quickly realized that the idea of the nanny was simply genius. According to her, the criminal could be released into a remote and far location, like a forest, where he would be trapped forever. Edwards quickly realized that by doing this, he wouldn't have to choose between his oath and his humanity. Thus, he expressed his gratitude towards Bella for this marvelous advice and promised to transmit it to his friend. The guard was now relieved, thinking that the best option would be to free the criminal on the sea. Bella was surprised by how much her advice had appeased Edwards. Despite having written this character as a basic antagonist, she realized that there was more to him, as it seemed that he was being forced into this role. Thus, she straight up asked Edwards for the reason someone as noble as him was following a waste of a birth certificate like the Emperor. Hearing the nanny ask such a question was rather unexpected for the guard. Seeing his reaction, Bella quickly apologized, fearing that Edwards might take her in for bad, mouthing his lord. At that moment, Edwards decided to answer and claimed that he had a villainous nature. Yet Bella affirmed that those words were a bad lie and that only a kind soul would offer to walk her home for free. Seeing how Edwards was the most eye-catching man at the start of her adventure, the heroine began to wonder if he was aware of his own handsomeness. With that, Edwards decided to heed Bella's words and demanded a reward for walking her home, and said that he was eager to see how generous it would be. Thus the heroine promised to invite him to go grab a bite together at their next reunion, but demanded an absolute mutual honesty. At that moment, Bella realized that time went by quickly. With that, she decided to part ways with the gentleman, but just as he was about to express how he wished to spend more time with her, duty suddenly called. Edward's colleague rushed to him and claimed that the Emperor demanded his immediate presence. With that, Edwards mounted his steed and took one last look at Bella, as an odd feeling pushed his soul towards her. With that, Edwards went on his way. Yet little did he know, his gaze was spotted by none other than the Grand Duke, who it had greatly upset as he began to wonder about the nature of their relationship. Later that night, Edwards and his friend had finally finished today's mission. The blonde one urged the redhead to stop working so late and go rest at home in order not to make his family worry. Yet Edwards gazed at the moon and affirmed that he had no one waiting for his return back home. He then asked his colleague not to look so grim. Edwards then asked the man about the spy he had placed in the household of Duke Winthrop and all the intel he managed to get from him. But upon hearing him claim that their spy had disappeared, Edwards was left baffled. Blondie explained that he had been looking for the spy after he went missing when the Duke returned. The horrified Edwards urged him to locate him as soon as possible, as only problems awaited them if he got caught. The soldier apologized and promised to locate the spy. Edwards was now in a tough situation, as he couldn't rely on the agent to warn the Duke about his brother anymore and had to personally speak to him. He needed to be as discreet as possible, seeing how the Emperor wouldn't spare him if caught protecting the Duke. Just like that, Edwards found himself in a pickle. Meanwhile, at the Winthrop mansion, the Grand Duke spotted Bella walking through the hall. The nanny was singing and seemed rather joyful. At the same time, the Duke couldn't help but think about her connection to Edwards. Rayan began to imagine the worst by picturing them close to each other. As he began to think that Bella, who was under the charm of Edwards, was working as a spy for him, the Duke was left horrified. Thus, he stopped Bella in the hall. The nanny asked her master if he had just returned. He ignored her question and pointed out how she seemed unusually joyful tonight. And before she could even claim that this was her usual mood, the Duke ignored her response and just walked her by. This interaction greatly worried the heroine. With that, she began to assume that a new problem had emerged. Thanks for watching. If you want part 2, drop the word Bella in the comments so I know you actually stuck around. Quick question, would you survive a week as a nanny for a future villain, or would you quit before the first poison cake?